Buenos días, damos unos momentos para que se sigan conectando a la sesión y comenzamos.
Hello, everybody. Hello, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. This is Ginevra, International Recruitment Officer, and I work at Università IULM. First of all, on behalf of the university and the Italian Chamber of Commerce in Mexico, I would like to welcome you and thank you for taking part of the 5th edition of Encuentro Creativo. Today, we are going to participate in this webinar titled Women's Participation, Empowerment, and Community Development in Tourism. And I'd like to thank our Professor Anna Scuttari, for being here today representing the university. Just a couple of words more about the professor, and then I will leave her the floor. Our professor is a PhD in economics, and she now works as associate professor for business administration and management at Università IULM, where she coordinates our master's program in hospitality and tourism management. Just a quick word about the university. We are located in Milan, and our specialty is communication, marketing, media studies, fashion, arts, and tourism, of course. I will now be following the webinar in the background, and I'm more than happy to leave the floor to the professor. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Ginevra, for introducing me. Buenos días a todos y a todas. I'm very happy to be here and to share a couple of thoughts around a topic that I believe is crucial for the future, for our future, globally seen, and also for our future as a university, for business administration as well. Why am I saying that? Because we're going to talk about women's participation, empowerment, and community development in tourism. We could say also we're going to talk about gender equality or gender inequalities. And why are we doing that? For different reasons. Not only because we have this goal as a global goal from the UN perspective, you know, that global goal number 5, the SDG number 5, is gender equality, and it's a kind of guidance for all of us all over the world. We'll see later on what it means, but also because at ULM we have a specific feature that makes us different from other universities, and this is the fact that we're placed at the 8th place, so 8th. We are the 8th university out of more than 1,500 in the world, according to the global rankings, that have a focus on gender equality. And we're the best in Italy in this sense. So this topic is relevant not only for tourism and for me as a researcher, as a professor, but also for ULM as an organization, right? But why did I choose that? It was also for a personal reason. Now I'm sharing my presentation, and I'm trying to introduce you to this topic in an unconventional way, I would say. Let me just share the screen, and let's hope you can see the right presentation mode. May I just ask for confirmation? Do you see the presentation mode of PowerPoint? Thumbs up. Okay,
Yes,
great.
we do.
Wonderful. So why did I start this journey? Even before I was starting my position or getting my position at ULM, why did I start to talk and to study women's participation in tourism? I was just participating to a well-known event in Italy. And I was asked by a journalist to be part of a panel where we had a businessman, you see to the right hand of the slide, a well-known professor, and you see myself in the middle of this event. It was held in a wonderful palace, and the journalist, who's the man to the left hand, continued asking me to give my opinion, to give my research insights by calling me Mrs. or Miss or Miss. Whereas the man together with me was continuously called Professor. And I was just like, why? So why does it happen if I'm a professor as well? At that time, I was a professor at the Munich University of Applied Sciences. I was a professor. I was working as a professor abroad, and I was having this title on top of the brochure of the event. And I was just wondering, right? So this is what we would call unconscious bias. People, the journalists, not knowing or not noticing that I'm a professor because I'm a woman and because I'm relatively young, right? So he doesn't expect a professor to be a young woman. And after the event, I was just mentioning, look, if you call me Mrs. or Miss, you need to call my colleague Mr., right? And he was just like very disappointed, and he felt very guilty. And at the end of the day, I noticed that it was really unconscious, right? So I started thinking that we need to start talking about stereotypes, about role modeling, and about the role of women, not only in the industry, but also in the academia, because otherwise we will never get the acknowledgements we fight for, and we will always end up in being secretary or supporting team assistant of someone else. So that was my personal reason. And then there's an ongoing debate in tourism as well. I put here an extraction, a screenshot of a very recent email exchange in a tourism network, which is called TriNet, as you can see from the email name you see on top of the slide, where there's plenty of criticism against events, conferences, and webinars and in general academic a moment of networking where you just have men, because it's believed that you should have gender balance even in events. And this is a very recent conversation that I'm using also in my lecture about gender and diversity in hospitality and tourism, just to show that when we start talking about gender and diversity, we end up in thinking that we need to be more inclusive in very general terms. As you can see from the conversation here, it starts with, hi, look, this is a fascinating conference, but very sad to see that all male lineup of speakers. And then in the conversation, someone at the end of the day says the discussion seems to focus only on female versus male, right? So we have it right here. But how about ethnicity, nationality, cultural background? So once we open this small window of gender equality, which might be small or big, maybe it's big, we start talking about many other dimensions for inclusiveness. And this is what I would like to do within the course that, by the way, I'm giving as an elective course at our master's program in hospitality and tourism management. This is what I try to convey, and also the reason why I'm doing it, right? I believe that the tourism industry should be more inclusive and more sensitive to all these aspects of diversity. So now, before we start with the annoying agenda, I'd like to make this very short exercise with you. So think of a pilot, a hotel manager, and a bus driver, right? Then, I mean, you cannot turn around, but maybe we can use this system. You can maybe type in the chat whether they were male or female. Can you maybe just use the chat to write? Male, male, male. Okay. Okay. Thank you all. All male. Okay. That's interesting. Male, female, male. Okay. Non-female. I imagine the driver a male, but it's fun to imagine a female pilot. They're cool. Okay. So the next step in the exercise would be, I would also have chosen a pilot man, a hotel manager female, and a bus driver man. But the interesting part of this exercise is that it probably varies among cultures and among countries, right? So I'm talking to you from here, from Italy, and in my mind, I have all the biases we have as Italians. Maybe Ginevra would have proposed the same attribution as I did, but in a different culture, we might have very different roles and role models, and also very different stereotypes. And I liked a lot your answer. Where was it? I imagine the driver a male, but it's fun to imagine a female pilot. They're cool. So very often we then associate the opposite, right? So if we imagine a female pilot, we immediately attribute some kind of aesthetical judgments around the woman having this role, right? So you didn't write she's good in driving or in using the airplane, right? You wrote she's cool. So you immediately associate the aesthetical part of the woman as a sign of the match between the job profile and her gender. So this is a great and simple example of gender biases we all have. And we need to accept that because we are all biased, but we need to develop some kind of consciousness of all those biases and some kind of control measures to make sure that even if we have biases, we try and be more equal or as equal as possible in addressing the opportunities and the possibilities and the job career of men and women, right? So thank you a lot for your responses. And if you want to continue writing, you can do that. I will check for the chat. Maybe I can ask, I don't know, Ginevra, if I missed something to support me, but I think I will have it in front of me and follow your comments. And go on this way. So feel also free to use the microphone if you want. You can raise your hand or you can talk. I'm very happy to listen about your thoughts. Indeed, this course is an elective course. The course Gender and Diversity in Hospitality and Tourism is an elective course I normally give during the second year of the master's program. And the wonderful issue about this, the wonderful aspect of this course is that we have plenty of people from different backgrounds. So last year we had a couple of Italians, a person from Denmark, a person from Turkey, a person from the Philippines, a person from India. So we had very, very different cultural backgrounds, very different interpretations of the role of a woman, of the role of a man, very different perception of work-life balance, of career expectations, and so on and so forth. So the richness of this course is not just made up by the contents I'm sharing, but also by the interaction between students. Let me just go on, otherwise we'll spend too much time on the very first slides. So what are we going to talk about today? First thing, key terms. So let's try and distinguish between gender, biological sex, gender identity, so that we make clear what we're talking about. Then let's try and measure gender inequalities. Let's try and see which kind of indicators we have to understand if there is a balance between the opportunities that men and women have in this world, or if there is an imbalance. Then let's focus on tourism, because our course, as you know, our master's degree program is on tourism. So let's understand the key features of tourism. And then once we've understood what are the difficulties the industry has, what kind of challenges we have for the future, let's understand how we can do better by looking into the dynamics of empowerment and how they can produce community development at local levels with some examples. I'm not sure if I will be able to cover all this content, but I'll try to at least make some hints to each and every point of this agenda. So I'd like to start with a disclaimer, with a quick one. This course and this presentation is going to talk about gender and sex in binary terms. We know from research that this binary distinction is very simplistic, but I'm going to use this oversimplification because statistics we have at this point and statistics we have in tourism at this point just using binary distinctions between men and women, right? So let's start from the key terms. what's gender? Because the course is about gender and diversity, right? So what's gender? Gender refers to socially constructed characteristics of men, women, or people socialized as men and women in our binary distinction, right? So that means that gender is associated with what we expect a woman to do in a society, what we expect a man to do. So we expect a woman to take care of her children, right? We expect a woman to be somehow beautiful in the aesthetical appearance. We expect a woman not to have hair in her body, right? This is our expectation. Of course, because we've done the example before with the pilot and the hotel manager, these expectations can vary in time and in societies. And that's why having people from different backgrounds in the course is so enriching. And this set of expectations we have on top of women and on top of men might be the reason why people that do not respond to these expectations with their behavior are discriminated, right? So they are somehow negatively judged. And this is called gender-based discrimination. And gender-based discrimination is not only a discrimination because of the behavior or the appearance of a person that does not comply with the expectations a society has. Gender-based discrimination intersects also with many other factors of discrimination. For instance, I was mentioning before at the very beginning of this presentation that I felt discriminated when they didn't use my professor title because I was young and I was a woman. So the fact that I was young was intersected with the fact that I was a woman, and it made the professor title so rare, so unlikely that they didn't use it, right? So this is an example of how these two levels may intersect. And indeed, the issue around how intersecting categories of discrimination work and overlap is brought by in literature and in studies around feminism and also around gender equality, is brought in by this wonderful woman. You know, I've said wonderful again, having also making also reference to her aesthetical appearance. She's called Kimberly Crenshaw, and she's a very famous academic professor that introduced feminist theory and intersectionality around this theory. She said being a Black woman with a disability is pretty much different from being a white woman with a disability. And that makes the issue much more difficult than in other cases. I'm skipping this short video around the differences in discrimination between men and women of color. You can have a look at that. Maybe I can put later on the link within our chat. But she's really just mentioning women and men and noticing with the interaction with the public that there's plenty of differences in the perception and in the knowledge around Black women and Black men that have experienced discrimination from police, right? So they have been probably, I can remember well, they have been killed by the police during some kind of problematic interaction. But the public that is listening to the speech remembers and recognizes only the men that were suffering this and not the women. But the situation was very similar to the two of them. So the fact of being a woman made the remembering more difficult than the fact of being a man. Then another short exercise for you. Who discovered climate change in your knowledge? Maybe you can also Google it if you have the chance to do that. Who's the person that's been attributed the discovery of climate change first? Maybe if you want to use the chat, that's great. Maybe you're looking for it. So Tyndall in 1859 is the man who's been recognized for having or credited for having introduced the discovery of the greenhouse effect. However, only recently it was Google says Eunice Newton. Great. So Google's right, and we are changing the perception that we had a couple of decades ago, because there are some women fighting for the recognition of and of the credits to Eunice Newton Foote, who was a woman, the first woman publishing on a scientific journal in the field of physics. And she was the first woman, or the first person and a woman, studying and explaining the greenhouse effect in the atmosphere. And what about the other question? Maybe this works best for Europeans, because Europeans know from the school what the Brundtland report is. It was a report around sustainability, within produced in the 80s, right? To introduce for the first time the concept of sustainability and sustainable development. This is the official document we refer to. Yes, it was Gro Harlem Brundtland who introduced that concept for the first time. And you know what? I was studying sustainability from the high school to the university. And after my 5th year of university, I didn't know that this was a woman. Let me just see what happens. This is Gro Harlem Brundtland, right? A woman that was also leading Norway for a couple of and leading the World Health Organization, by the way. And this is Eunice Newton Foote. Happy to see that Google recalls the right people, even with some variations I see in the chat, Karen. Anyway, I was shocked, and I have to tell you that I was shocked when I noticed that the Brundtland report made reference to exactly to the leadership of a woman. And you know, the funny fact is that Gro Harlem is the family name is Gro Harlem and not Gro Brundtland, right? Brundtland is the name of her husband. But anyway, at least we should make these people visible, right? We should recognize the credits to those people and let those people, together with many other people and with many other leaders that represent a different style maybe of leadership and also a different way of doing things, we should give them the floor and emphasize their contributions, in my point of view. And this is why I'm doing this kind of exercises. Let's go on with this first definition part, and let's understand how gender differs from sex, from biological sex, and from gender identity. So if we say gender, as I said before, we refer to the socially constructed and socially perceived expectations around men and women. Whereas if we refer to sex, we refer to the biological characteristics, the physical characteristics of men and women, right? So it's not about the societal perception and expectations, it's about how we're made. Even in that case, as I said before, we acknowledge that there's no binary distinction, but we also acknowledge that the majority of people can be split into these two bigger categories, being a man or being a woman, but only the perspective is different. The one perspective, the one of sex, is a perspective that looks into the physical aspect, whereas the gender perspective looks into the more socialized or society-related aspect. Gender identity is another level. It refers to how the person feels him or herself. So if I'm looking like a woman, that doesn't mean necessarily that I'm feeling like a woman, right? So this is the distinction. We're not going to go into detail, but just to repeat that with an example, I took this one. So I took the baby wearing example because I think it's useful to think about stereotypes we have in mind and expectations we have in mind. So if we read this picture and we look at this picture, this wonderful person with a baby wrapped, right, wearing a baby, we would say that probably from a biological point of view, we would say 90% or 99%, this is a man. And we perceive that the person is socialized as a man, right? But we perceive some kind of clash because this person is wearing a baby, which is something that normally women do, right? So this refers to gender aspects. So the fact that we do not expect a man to wear a baby refers to the gendered roles we have interiorized, we have in our minds, and we don't always are aware about. And in that sense, we need to tackle these expectations that or these stereotypes we have, because we need to be able in the tourism industry and elsewhere to accept that there might be interesting and wonderful variations from our standards in our mentality, in our culture. And in this sense, of course, we don't know anything about the gender identity of this person because that's just a picture. We don't know if the person feels himself as a man. And we don't know anything about the sexual orientation of that person. That doesn't matter in this case. But just to let you see the differences between the levels. If we take this picture, I don't know what happens to you, but to me, the clash, so the distance between what I expect from a man and what I see on the picture was a little bit less. I don't know if you can feel it like this. This is probably perceptual. It has to do with specific knowledge on different cultures and so on. But because I know that wearing babies is an African practice, if I see a person of color with a baby and with this kind of colors that recall me the African culture somehow, I accept it differently, and I have I perceive it as a normal thing, right? I don't know what happens to you, and I don't have any judgment on top of that, but this is just to show that we perceive things differently depending on our cultural background, and also the expectations we have on people are very, very different. I was just joking a bit because I was I was curious about baby wearing in Mexico when I was preparing this lecture, and I saw that your specific name for the baby wearing is rebozo, which is probably this piece of cloth you use. But when looking for that, without any gendered keyword, right? As you can say, I put Mexican rebozo baby. I just see pictures of women, right? I scrolled down, but there was no man in that set of pictures. So again, this shapes our expectations. If you think about how AI works and how ChatGPT or Gemini work, they work the same way, right? So they reproduce our stereotypes when we ask them questions. So be aware that each and every time you ask a question or you search something, you find a representation of your culture probably, or the culture that is represented in that tool. And not necessarily in those representations, you don't have any kind of biases or any kind of discrimination. But let's get back to the more political, let's say, things. Let's get back to our main reference point as a sector, which is the UN framework of Sustainable Development Goals. So I said it at the very beginning, we refer to the UN framework for Sustainable Development Goals when we address gender equality, because this gender equality issue is exactly one of the SDGs, and particularly the SDG number 5. And the UN, regarding this gender equality part, the UN states that gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but it's also a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. So it's the baseline for equity, but also for economic success. This is what we can see there. So it's not only a matter of being ethically compliant with this goal, but it's also a matter of creating businesses that have more power to generate profit, more variety in their views and in their activities. So it's a matter of guaranteeing successes, just not only for individuals, so for women, but also for the entire society. And further, UN states that provided what the exact aspects concerning gender equality, and they are providing equal access to education, to healthcare, to decent work, and provide representation in political and economic decision-making processes. Okay, so there are then 9 targets and 14 indicators to monitor gender equality, but we will not look into them because we don't have that much time today. But if you're curious to know more about this, you can look at the link I've put there. There's very different indicators, including access to mobile phones, access to management positions, and so on, right? So they're not tourism specific. That's also what I wanted to say. But UN Tourism, as the United Nations Representative Organization for Tourism, has applied this goal to the tourism sector. And in just a few seconds, we'll see how. This is the global report on women in tourism. And this is the report that for the first time tackles gender issues in tourism. It recognizes a couple of very important things. From the overall perspective, tourism is not a male-dominated sector, right? We have lots of women in the tourism industry. I've just checked before we started this class today for the percentage of women we have in our courses. On average, I have 77% of women in the hospitality and tourism management course. However, Italian statistics say that management positions in the sector are held by 21% of women. So just, let's say it correctly, just 21% of management positions in tourism and hospitality are held by women, which means that the proportion is inverted, almost inverted. So plenty of young women study tourism, but not all of them manage to get to management positions. This is not a specific feature of tourism. Indeed, tourism is better than many other sectors because it starts by having 50-50 employment, right, rates. So we have more women than other industries working in the industry. However, we have what we would call, and I will explain it later on, vertical segregation, which means that women remain in the low-level roles. They do not manage to climb up the ladder and to get to management positions. That's why UN Tourism developed 5 goals to achieve gender equality in tourism. First of all, provide decent work for women in employment, which does not only mean that we need to have many women working in tourism, we need to ensure also good working conditions for women in the sector, in the industry. You know, tourism is a sector in which seasonality plays a role, shift work plays a role. You work on Sundays, you work on Saturdays, you work on Christmas Eve, you work on New Year's Eve, and this has an impact also on the work-life balance. Second point, entrepreneurship. So it's true that we have many women, but we don't have that many female entrepreneurs. That makes the goal number 2 more clear and evident. So we should support the leading role of women in enterprises, even in small and medium enterprises. We should provide, goal number 3, education and training that promotes gender equality. So this means that I do not only have to have many girls in my classes. I need to make them aware about the difficulties they might encounter when they enter the industry, right? And I need to empower them. I need to make them sensitive to this discrimination issues, to these biases we might have, and I mentioned before. Finally, we have leadership policy and decision making. So to make sure that they are represented in influential and positions. And last but not least, this is a goal that has to do with the societal empowerment and the secondary effects that the empowerment, the individual empowerment of a woman brings together. So literature and research around the empowerment of women in tourism, but also in other sectors related to the community, shows that women tend to take care not only about the business, but also about sustainable development of the region. So empowering women and making them capable and willing and able and recognized to be in management positions in some specific businesses could also ensure a good development of the entire community. Better attention or a sharpened attention towards sustainable development. Just to give you an overview about gender equality in tourism, I started with some statistics. We have here earning levels of women and men in tourism and in the broad economy. These figures come out of the Gender Global Report on Women in Tourism. As you can see, I've highlighted Mexico because that's your country. And you have the percentage of women's earnings compared to men's earnings in the broad economy. So you see that overall in the entire economy in Mexico, women earn 84.87% of men. So they earn less money. But in tourism, the situation is even worse for Mexico. You have 73.85%. So a woman earns much less than a man in the industry, and much less in tourism, or quite less in tourism as in the broad economy. Just to start introducing the next section that is about gender-based inequalities. So how do we measure inequality? We've said that tourism is a sector in which women are well represented overall, but not in management positions, right? So when we want to highlight the inequalities we have in tourism concerning the opportunities that women have, we need to look into these two specific phenomena. The first one is the so-called horizontal segregation. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but women tend to be waitresses, they tend to be receptionists, they tend to be in the housekeeping sector. So they tend to occupy roles that are extensions of their domestic role. So they do the same as they did at home, but they do it in the paid world economy, right? This is called horizontal segregation. So you have only some roles occupied and available for women. And this somehow connects me to the very first reflection we did about the way they were labeling me in that very first event I was mentioning, right? It was not only my age, but also the fact that not only the fact that I'm a woman, but also the fact that there is some kind of horizontal segregation in academia, and it's much less likely to see a woman being a professor than it is for a man being a professor, right? So this type of role is not the typical role you associate to a woman. I don't know if this is the same for you in Mexico, but university professors are more men than women, whereas school professors tend to be more women than men. Is it the same in your country? Maybe you can write it in the chat. Is it the same? Do you expect a school professor to be a woman and a university professor to be a man in your imagination? Yes, right? So the more you climb the ladder, the more the expectation goes towards a man occupying that position, which shows us that we are far away from achieving equality. So I was mentioning horizontal segregation, right? This one. But we also have vertical segregation, which means that women remain at lower level positions. And this too can happen together, right? So even in those sectors in which women are very well represented, such as housekeeping, you might have plenty of women working as housekeepers, but just the level above, so the housekeeping manager, is then a man. And that shows both horizontal and vertical segregation. This is not only a matter, this segregation phenomenon, which of course we should tackle and avoid, is not a matter of equality only. So it's not a medical problem only. It's also a matter of being efficient and having missed or not being efficient and having missed opportunities for growth and innovation, right? So the more diverse the team is, the better it can introduce innovation and the better it can be sensitive to diversity and specific issues, right? So it's not only a matter of equality, it's also a matter of productivity and efficiency. So what can we do to overcome these problems? What we refer to when we think about solutions and what the literature brings in as solutions is listed here. Diversity trainings. This one is one of those trainings, right? Flexible working policies and a diversity supportive organizational culture. This means not only having individual solutions, but also having a shared sense of a shared organizational culture, a shared business culture that supports the needs and the specific requirements and styles also of women being leaders. It means also having proactive and transparent equality measures. So to show some kind of decision-making processes that support the change of the status quo. And I just mentioned an example. When I was recruited in University of Applied Sciences in Munich, I noticed that during the recruitment process, they had to check for gender-based discrimination, but they also had to prefer a woman in case of equal performance. So because they said we have a general overall goal of increasing the amount of women being a professor, we decide that in case we have equal performance of men and women, we opt for the recruitment of a woman. This is an example of gender equality measure. Then personal development plans for women, particularly when getting back from maternity leave. Is there any mother in the audience? Maybe you're too young, but let me just ask this question. Do you have children? Anyone that wants to share this information, because that's your personal information? Not really? So once you will have children, you will notice, or if you in case you want to have them, but once you will have them, if you want them, you will notice that getting back to work will be very hard. And a personal development plan might be a good support for you during work. Then you have explicit assessment and explicit reference to women's empowerment policies. You have support to women, specifically returning from career breaks, and maternity leave is one of the most impacting career breaks we can mention. And finally, something that I also like a lot is the inclusion of men into a constructive dialogue. You can have a look if you want to the He for She activists website. We don't have the time to have a look at it, but this is a wonderful network of men fighting for equality, right? So that they can also balance their work and life spheres. So when I was introducing this course for the first time, I had some male students and some female students, and the male students started by saying, I'm not sure if this is really something I have to care. So I'm interested in the course. However, it's not my problem, right? So the course was especially designed to make sure that at the end of the day, the male students ended up by saying, that's also my problem. That's not only a problem of women. So including men into this kind of dialogue is really crucial. Let's bring in an example, right, before we move on. I don't have that much time, but if I may, I would take some more minutes. How much time do I have, Ginevra?
I think we're running a bit late because it's almost check with the organizers. I think we do have a couple of minutes. I already saw that we have some questions. So I don't know. I'm gonna ask the organizers. You, Professor, can still go, and I will be right back.
You asked. Right? I'm just introducing this example and then skipping to some interesting website to play with. Maybe the students or aspirational students can do that later on. So what did the Accor hotel chain do? They did a plan, right? So they decided to tackle inequality in the income, particularly, so the gender pay gap, to make sure that within this business, there is an equal treatment in terms of economic reward for men and women. And what did they do? They started from establishing a methodology to monitor equality, so to monitor the differences in salary between men and women. They said that there is a need to introduce diversity and gender diversity management from top, so involve leaders also in this procedure. They introduce also some specific networks, right? So to make sure that there is a change in the business culture, and not only a top-down change that comes from the managers, right? So to make employees sensitive to this issue, to this topic, and then training and supporting women to evolve in their career. So let me just skip that and start with this very quick example. I have two of them I want you to play a bit with before we conclude. This is an interesting website in which you can compare work of men and women spent in domestic work and unpaid care work, right? So you know that in our life we have the paid work, which is the job, right? The thing you get paid for. And then the unpaid work, which means taking care of the house, cleaning, shopping, all those things. And if you look at this website and you take the link and open it, you will see that, let me just copy paste it if I can. You can compare Mexico and Italy, and you will see that both countries have, right? I'm doing it live if I can. Both countries have very, very different but still problematic situations, right? You can see my screen, right? You can select countries and regions
Actually,
here.
no, sorry, Professor.
You cannot see it.
No,
All right.
not at the moment. Now we can.
You
Yes,
can see it,
great.
right?
Yeah.
So we can look for Mexico and Italy. So if we look at this graph, we can see that the equal situation, so the equality situation would be along this line. So if Italy or Mexico were along this line, that would mean that men and women spend the same amount of time on work and paid and unpaid care work. However, we are somewhere here, which means that both Italy and Mexico have women spending more than 2 times more for unpaid care work than for work. So basically, we do twice as much, more than twice as much as a woman compared to what men do in unpaid care work. And why do I mention that? Because of course, if you're spending more than twice as much time in unpaid care work, you will have much less time to spend for your job. And your career progress will be more difficult. The second thing I'd like to show you, and I'm putting it into the chat before we finish, is this one that refers to child penalty, right? Let me just share again our screen. You see the screen right now, right? So child penalty.
Sorry.
You don't
we
see
don't
it?
See that, no?
Again.
Now we do, yes.
So child penalty refers to the reduction in women's earnings relatively to men due to having had a child, right? So you normally reduce your earnings, and you have also a reduction in the employment rate. The long-run child penalty refers to a penalty as a woman you have even after 10 years from the birth of your first child. And let me just show you some statistics. Here you have a comparative study in the Netherlands, in Belgium, around child penalty in different sectors. And probably you can see tourism somewhere. Tourism is here. You have a child penalty of 0.31, which means that after 10 years of having had a child, you have an employment rate lower of 30% than the one of men. So plenty of women lose their job or reduce their participation into the labor economy to take care of their children. Whereas, as you can see, men have a slight drop here, but then the gray scale line is the one of men. And what is important to highlight here is that in hotels and restaurants, you have the worst situation, as you can see, in terms of percentages. Why? Because tourism is a sector in which you work during Sundays, during holidays, you have shifts, you have to work at night sometimes. So it's really a difficult aspect we need to take into consideration. Right, let me, you can play a bit with the child penalty atlas. You can compare Mexico to Italy on your own. And you will see that we are both in a bad situation. Women, after plenty of years, have a penalty that is embarrassing. But if you compare countries and you look for those countries that you know that are more advanced, you can see that this penalty can be reduced by using specific policies, by changing cultures, by changing mindsets. And this is why we are here and we are working on this. Let me just finish by mentioning a couple of numbers and a couple of effects of women empowerment in the industry. Numbers. We know that we have lots of women in the industry. We know that women earn less than men in this industry globally, right? Particularly in Mexico, we've seen the situation. We know that there is not a high representation of women in high-level positions. But the tourism performs better on average than the overall economy, which leads me to the conclusion that we need to do a lot in tourism. However, we are more advanced than other sectors. That's why we can show also good examples, right? Because we have higher participation of women in the industry and we are in a better position compared to other sectors. Let's take the transport sector, for instance. That's a male-dominated one. Then, second and very last thing I'd like to mention, how do we look into empowerment and how can we foster empowerment? Empowerment means being able to take control over the own decisions, right? So being able to set the personal agenda, being able to gain the skills we want, being able to have self-confidence, to solve problems, and so on. And empowerment can be psychological, so referring to the only individual. It can be social, so it can be shared and also transferred to society. It can be political because you can make political changes out of your personal and social empowerment. This leads to a better involvement of women in tourism and also to some effects for sustainable development. Right? I don't want to mention all the levels of empowerment, but just take some examples. This is an example of psychological empowerment we had at the Hochschule München, so the Munich University of Applied Sciences, where we gave specific webinars and seminars and trainings to women that wanted to, that needed to negotiate their salary to reduce the pay gap. This is another example of empowerment concerning the social sphere. Social empowerment of the project She Culture. That is a project about the way toys are constructed, right? So you are shaped, your culture is shaped from the very beginning when you're a child and you play, right? when you play your toys, you start thinking what kind of roles are expected to be connected to a woman and what are expected to be connected to a man. And finally, networking activities. This is an example of a network in Italy, or two networks in Italy, where tourism managers, being women, they can connect and share good practices. So that's just a few examples, a few ways of improving things. I wanted also to give you an insight from a specific case study, but I don't think we have the time for that. Let me just conclude here by saying that women have the power to develop more in the tourism sector. They have the chance to take the lead of some businesses, particularly of small businesses. If we had seen the example here, we would have also explored the specific dynamics of empowerment at small scale in a business level. But still, there is still a lot of work to be done in our societies, in our political environment, and also in our mindsets, because we are the ones that shape our society. I hope this was interesting for you. I have some questions in the chat. Let me just read them out, and I'm more than happy to listen to your questions. I gave you a very special and specific insight on the course. We have plenty of other courses that are more mainstream, right? So not that specific. We have business administration, we have accounting, we have HR, so other more well-known topics, but this was the one I was wanting to share for this time. Let me just see the questions. What will be the biggest change when it comes to the working life for women this year? And what is to be expected or hoped for in the future? I think the two big challenges, if I understood, Paulina, the question well, I try to answer that. The two main challenges that we noticed when we were asking women in our research were first, how to have care support in non-conventional hours. Because if you work at the reception, if you work in a hotel, you don't work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., right? But the care support you have in the kindergarten, so in the services, in the care services that are officially provided to you, at least in Europe, they range from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So what about having support from public institutions, from childcare facilities out of this range? And then the second thing has to do with the flexible organization of working time, particularly for women that work with shifts. It would be revolutionary to take care of their needs and their requirements and make sure that there's kind of predictability of their shifts so that they can organize their private life, right? Responding also to the needs of the business. But once you are open for solutions that enable a work-life balance, then you can find those solutions. I would say there's two main challenges. This was so interesting. Thank you a lot, Lorena. I would dare to say that we as men are the problem, since we keep perpetuating stereotypes and discriminatory roles. Changing and questioning our beliefs are not the only thing that we need to do. We have to participate and take action in every situation of discrimination that we witness, because we become accomplices by remaining silent. Alan, I'm more than convinced that this is the way. I didn't talk about harassment, but tourism and particularly the food service sector is one of those sectors in which it happens, and it's also socially accepted, right? Because if you're a waitress, you might accept that someone tells you that you're beautiful, even if it's not said politely. So I'm more than convinced that this is the way, and without your contribution, we will just be fighting against a wall, probably. So I'm more than convinced that your support is necessary. Women are gradually gaining more opportunity. Yes, Ricardo, of course, I'm sure. The problem is the gradually term. So I don't know. There are some predictions about when we will achieve equality, and they don't propose very quick results. But maybe the process needs to be small and gradual. I don't know. What is your biggest challenge as a woman in this industry? Well, I mean, I'm not really in the industry, Juan. I'm not in the industry. I'm in the academia. But still, I think the main challenge, the two challenges are for me, but I'm not really in the hotel industry, right? So I'm in an academic position. For me, the most challenging issue is mobility. Because once you have a family, you're much less mobile. And the academic career is a career based on mobility. So you need to go around, and it's quite hard to build an academic career not being mobile. There's plenty of very interesting studies about mobility and gender. By the way, women are much less mobile than men are. You could start talking about mobility of women in some Muslim countries in which women are subject to the decision of men to be mobile. But this is completely another chapter. Even in tourism, it applies, right? But this is another chapter. But the biggest challenge for women working in hospitality, I think, is the one I've said before. So the shifts and seasonal work. Ariel Ortega, thank you for writing in Italian. There's another question, Zaira. How can tourism contribute to the economic and social empowerment of women without failing into models of exploitation or inequality? Yes, we've touched this topic very little, but the contribution is already there because it enables the participation in the workforce, right? So it enables the participation to work much more than other sectors do. And particularly in emerging countries, in emerging destinations, and in emerging economies, women have the opportunity to shape their own small and micro business, which is something wonderful for their empowerment. What should we do? We should take care of the development of these careers. Not only guaranteeing access and participation, we should take care of the development of the career. And this gets back to the slides I've shown before: mentoring, supporting, involving men in initiatives, having showcasing business cases in which there has been an achievement, there has been a equality or signs of equality. These are the main ways we can mention. And then my first choice was tourism, but I decided to study graphic design. Tourism is still pending, but I still want the career since it really catches my attention. Good luck, Neri. Stay with your passions. And thank you to the very last comment. So yeah, this was a very unconventional lecture, right? So I hope that it raised a lot of questions, as I can see. And there's another one. First, thank you for sharing an important discussion. We hope that there in Mexico have more talks about that. It's our job, men and women, to start questioning all the things you say. Thank you, Daniela. Women have the power to do everything, and not only unpaid jobs. I totally agree. Do you think that in the future we will achieve better job equality for women? How can we help? I hope so. I hope so. I'm not sure. I am also, the more I deep dive into this topic, the more I'm aware that for some parts of women's life, and for some cultures, and for some individual choices, equality does not necessarily mean 50-50%, right? So each and everyone should achieve the own and personal version of him or herself, which does not necessarily mean to work 20 hours a day and have 10 children. The balance is individual. What we should achieve, and these are responsibilities of our governments and of people like me that teach at university, we should achieve opportunities that are equal. So once opportunities are equal, you have the freedom to choose what path is best for you. But at the moment, opportunities are not equal, and this is the problem.
All right. I think we're done with everything. Professor, really, thanks a lot for the webinar. It was super interesting, and being a working young woman myself, it was very interesting to listen to everything. And according to the questions that you received, I think that also the participants feel like the same as me. And well, thanks a lot again. And for everybody who's watching, if you have some other questions, you can contact us. I think it will be okay, either me or the professor. You can find our emails on our website, ulm.com. And well, thank you very much once again for being here. And thank you, Professor, for the interesting lecture.
Thank you a lot.